Hi, Mark McNutt back at you again here in Living Well, and we're at mid-October, and we're right past the new moon in Libra, headed for Scorpio times, and probably the most exciting times of our lives. You know that there's the Chinese curse about may you live in interesting times, and we sure do. I mean, I've been doing this thing for 53 years next month, and it's just uh, it's like life is accelerating right now so much so that since many people have their mind on politics at the moment, and also my interest is in personal development and getting the most out of people and getting, finding their yes and all that. So there's two different parts here. A lot of people ask me about politics. I usually don't comment on it that much. I think about it constantly, and truth be told, I am a news buff and had a dad that was an editor professionally. And we would get lots of magazines and newspapers and really well read and when I was growing up and so forth. So I brought that with me. But on the other hand, I noticed that politics is endless, and people are very factionalized, and they want you to support their team and not the other team. And this becomes even more divisive under, Libra is allegedly the sign of peace, but it's also the sign of, the this, and on the other hand that. So politics can very much be that way. Yet people want to know. They want to know a definitive answer as far as like who's going to win, who's going to lose. But I think the paradigm is much bigger than that. First of all, people are motivated by their emotions, not their intellect, and they're motivated by their tribes, and they're motivated by personal interest. So when your personal interest matches the group interest, then you unite with that group. There are a couple of very stark different philosophies right now. It's like, do we serve the economy or does the economy serve us? That's one question. Another one is, are we in it for the individual or for our tribe or for the collective of humanity? So those are pretty much all the issues that are going on. You might say, well, that's pretty simplistic. Yeah, it is. But think about it. Take some time to think about that rather than your own piece in the puzzle. So I wanted to show up this chart of what's going on now to start my talk. And as I mentioned, this part's going to be a little bit on politics. And so here's the chart of the new moon. As you can see, one big T square and not a whole lot else going on. So this is the culmination of many months. In January, it's like I have to recap the story each time, and it gets longer. In January, there was a lunar eclipse on January 10th over China, and a lot changing at that point. And the Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn had caught up with each other along with Ceres and retrograde Mercury under the full moon. And so basically there was the pandemic energy and the restructure of business, of government, all these things started to be reshuffled. Now, it's not that the pandemic is affecting business and that's it. It's like the 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 stars, the horoscope, the patterns are affecting all of these things. There's places like Belarus where the government is falling, even though it's not about the pandemic or about the economy. So, so we're having a very stimulating election this time. Mars went into Aries around June or so, and typically Mars is a focal point for all these things, and typically Mars, which has to do with yang energy, motivation, drive, chutzpah, the male, striving kind of energy. Mars is most at home in its own sign of Aries. and typically Mars is in a sign for 2 months. But Mars went retrograde this summer. So Mars is in Aries for 8 months. And, that's a pretty long time. Because Mars in Aries is very volatile, very intense, very self-serving, very has a strong yang element that also can indicate violence and opposition and a battle. So Mars in Aries is about identifying with self, and Mars retrograde in Aries, where it's been since I think August 10th it started retrograding. Mars retrograde in Aries is like the dark side of that. So we see this in terms of politics. When Mars went into Aries, we had the stimulation into Black Lives Matter, and people who are very pent up were releasing their frustrations and energy through getting together and protesting, or firing off their guns, or whatever they're doing. But there's a lot of raw emotion behind being cooped up and being told you can't have a Venusian life, if you will. Venus is all about how we congregate together and how we schmooze and how we love. And so you can see the energy of personal self without the balance with the other, makes for an extreme imbalance. So Mars moving through Aries, we've seen as Mars squared Pluto, we saw violence erupting. Mars went past Pluto to Saturn. Mars square Saturn was about the structure of a certain president not wanting to negate the more conservative elements and the people who were ready for armed revolution and so forth. And on the other side, we see just people not seeing each other, really. And so then Mars went past Pluto, then it conjuncted Saturn. Mars conjunct Saturn was lingered for a while, and at the end of which, when Mars was retrograde, Mars retrograding in square with Saturn, was Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying, and the call for a new Supreme Court justice and so forth. As Mars retrograded again over Pluto, we saw Trump's finances come out and Trump getting COVID. So yes, you may notice that this was all in the same week, and which is pretty amazing, and so forth. So it's best for me to not pick sides, except, boy, I've already voted, and go out and vote. Vote early. That's all I want to say about that. So this is still playing out, and there's a couple of big questions that people would like me to answer. One is about, well, is the election in question, is it going to be as weird as 2000 when Mercury was retrograde, and the results were in question, and sort of like, actually, it looks that weird and weirder. So the answer is yes. Mercury is retrograde up until the night of the election, turns around, goes direct the next day. And Mars continues its retrograde until about November the 12th. Meanwhile, the new moon is also at that same time period. So what we're going to see is actually a lot of unsurety during, particularly in the next few weeks and at least a week after the election. Things will not be decided on election night, and no matter what happens, there's going to be a lot of dissatisfied people. So that's what I can tell you about the election. Mars retrograde has its repercussions of anger, violence, taken to the streets. Mercury retrograde has that sense of unknowing and I used to say 20 years ago, when Mercury went retrograde, I would say, oh, it's a time like when checks get lost in the mail. So that was my 90s version of it. Well, things could get lost in the mail this time. There can be all kinds of scenarios, and I don't want to paint a doom and gloom scenario, and I don't want to paint a scenario of some pointless conspiracy theory, because people who immerse themselves in these theories, no matter what the point is, it's because they feel emotionally insecure. So they want to have a very firm way to paint black and white somewhere. And the world just is way, way more colorful than that. And I revel in the colors. Anyway, so Mars comes out of retrograde about November 12th, new moon about November 12th. Things could play out in a really dark Halloween-y kind of fashion over the next month. And I'm not looking forward to it, except that I'm also fascinated. It's kind of like being fascinated with a slasher movie or something like that. This is so weird that it's interesting to watch. But on the other hand, my heart is breaking every day. Speaking of Halloween, the full moon is on Halloween this year, and it's Sun opposition Moon, as always. The Moon is conjunct Uranus. Now, I'm an expert at navigating Moon conjunct Uranus energy. It's very wild card. It's very unpredictable. Things do not go as planned, and it's always some kind of a contradiction. Now, that's in the transits, but any of us who live with what I call Uranians, anybody who's strongly affected by Uranians, they see the shift, they see the back and forth. Donald Trump is the Sun conjunct Uranus and in Gemini, and following that man for over 50 years, since I grew up in New York, he has made a living. He's actually made his way by way of being a businessman and then pulling the carpet out from under and going, no, you don't, or whatever. So 50 years of making agreements and then doing the element of surprise in order to undermine whatever that agreement is. That's how he has done business. That's Uranian. That's Sun conjunct Uranus. That's like his personality is invested in the show of the surprise and so forth. So that continues, and so normally, looking at the Moon conjunct Uranus, the weekend before the election, I'd be like, oh, Donald Trump is going to do something weird. But you know what? The Uranian aspects are always expect the unexpected. So we all expect that. We all expect him to do something weird the weekend before the election, even if we're, supporters of Donald Trump. We're like, yeah, well, he'll pull it together, or whatever we're expecting. So the election is about to confound our expectation, and that the most important element, the thing that they usually call an October surprise, that hasn't happened yet, that is likely to be more extreme than anything that's happened. Now, bear in mind, the finances, COVID, the economy, just all these statements that have been made, the Supreme Court, all these things. Something else weird is going to happen. Something which is not even in the spectrum of the Supreme Court, of all the other 5 subjects I just mentioned over and over. So be prepared for that, and expect your expectations to be confounded. Expect that to happen not before November 1st. So that should be really interesting. So that's what you need to know about the election. There's and as I mentioned, there's philosophies out there, but basically people vote from a place of their own emotions and from their tribal beliefs. And that's what really governs human nature, not what you say, not your intellect. I'm sorry, this is not how people actually live. It's how people think they live, and then when they start talking about their feelings, they say, "You start to feel like this." Well, no. Why don't you say, "I feel this way"? And that's because we don't claim our emotions, and yet we project them. Anyway, that's what I want to say about politics. So that ends part one. Part two. Okay, so this is the second part of my talk is more what I'm comfortable sharing with other people, um, which is about I believe in the person and how the person connects with the collective, and I believe in the microcosm of ourself and the macrocosm of what's out there, and they reflect each other. So again, we live in the most amazing, interesting times that uh, that we've had in our lifetimes, and along with that, the what as an astrologer and as a magical person, I'm very aware. It's like I am a wizard, and being a wizard, there's a responsibility that happens, and that responsibility is to walk the fine line between what my vision is and also allowing uh, nature to take its course. So, um, my vision. I might have a vision for how the world should be or whatever, and I might have a vision for other things. For example, the doom and gloom of the summer. I was looking 6 months ago. I was like, oh, Mars is retrograde during this time period. Oh no, that could mean violence, kidnappings, murders, civil unrest, all this other stuff. And I didn't want to give too much of a voice to that because that stimulates it more. What I like to do is actually talk about the personal. And so, what can we do with this personally uh, hyper individual kind of energy? Where can we project this retrograde Mars? Retrograde Mars, the retrograde of any planet, by the way, is when the planet appears to be moving backwards as seen from the Earth. Uh, Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter were all retrograde during the summer and have turned around in the last few weeks. And my previous message was that there was going to be a turnaround time in the end of September and beginning of October, and that would give us clues for the future. Then what happens is, as those three planets in Capricorn, Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, come out of retrograde, they start moving forward, but they don't suddenly, zip on forward. They're coming out of this place of non-movement. So picture a car. You're driving in a car. You miss your exit on the road, and you're like, oh, overshot it. Then you have to make a 3-point turn and come back. That's what the retrogrades do. But you're not going 60 miles an hour when you first turn around. You're, accelerating. And that's what we're doing now. We're accelerating. We're not accelerating forward in terms of our personal development, but in terms of the structures of Jupiter being truth, honesty, wisdom, and expansion. Saturn being grounding, security, definition, and Pluto being transformation. All these are interacting. They're all within a matter of 6 degrees the whole month of November, meaning that there's a very unified field moving in a certain direction. Don't look at it like a political direction. Look at it like the world is changing rapidly. How do I want to ride the wild pony here? And my advice: do something new. Find a new creative outlet. Explore in new ways. Definitely do not try to go down the old groove and try to make it work, because something new is going on, and we co-create that. So the reason that as a wizard I don't want to tell you too much about specifically what that could be for you, unless you talk to me individually, and then I'll be your coach. But I don't want to say too much, because for each individual it's different, and I don't want to have the codependent relationship. I want you to decide. So the Jupiterians, the Sagittarians, it's like learning new ways in order to be free and to be expansive when sometimes there's that limitation of you can't leave your apartment except maybe to go, feed the ducks in the pond or something. And then for Saturninians, which is a hard word to say, but that's, Capricorn type people, like to make plans and carry them out. It's okay to recognize that the earthquake has happened and all your plans are being redone. Because, there's Pluto, transformation, moving and shaking everything. And Pluto in Capricorn is going to redefine the structures. So at these times when things are most unsure, it's actually really good news because we're not stuck. Old patterns are slipping away. But you can kind of lose the momentum by trying to reclaim the old, and where we should be going is into some new endeavor. So under these same aspects, the new moon starts with the Libra energy. So here's Libra about harmony and balance and the awareness of the give and take and imbalance. And that was in October 16th. And then we move into full moon, which is Halloween, going into Samhain, going November 1st, Day of the Dead. Very appropriate time for that. And so it's the energy of like the death and rebirth energy. But this is going to be pretty much on the table. I mean, the good news is everybody is going through a lot right now. We're all being affected. I live in this lovely sanctuary and was bragging about my joy of like sharing with nature and all that, and then my cat gets eaten by a cougar. This is like in my safe abode. This is the kind of transformations that are going on now. So where are we moving with it? Well, under the full moon, at the cusp of the month into November 1st, things come to a head, and then there's going to be a release point of 2 weeks. And during that release point, as Mercury has also been retrograde in Scorpio and continues to be in Scorpio, well, anyway, it's okay to feel the dark side. It's okay to go in there. It's okay to maybe this Halloween, of any Halloween, every Halloween we play up the dark side and kind of the murky bits and all that. And maybe we're just going to, stay at home and like Zoom talk with each other while wearing, masks. And maybe you can decorate your mask with skull and crossbones or whatever, like make it part of the game, because the game right now is transformation. And transformation is something that we're all going through together, but we're all, it's like life. We're all going through it together. But when we get on board and when we get off board, and our fractal with it, each one is individual. So I call on your creativity now, because this full moon will be moon conjunct Uranus, which very, very inspired, creative time. And so we can only be so obsessed with politics and with the outcome of this thing pushing and pulling over that thing. But as far as our individual actions, inspirations, liberty, emotions, we're at a springboard point when we can really accelerate. And so what happens is, after Mercury comes direct on November 4th, that's a integrating of our mind, of our attitude that way. And then Mars turns around, and these political scenarios they continue to play out into January. That's another talk altogether. But our personal scenarios, very related. What do you want to do next year? Start thinking about it now. Start planting the seeds. Start looking at what your next spring is going to be like, because right now is the potent time for planting those seeds for next year. So, happy Samhain, happy rebirth, happy being in touch with your emotions, and I wish you all well.